Good evening, Sunday evening time for our Old Testament studies in 1 Samuel chapter 22. And we're following David as he's on the run from King Saul, who's trying to take his life. And he's went down to the part of the country where the tabernacle was set up, and he was starving to death, he and his men. And he went in, and the priest gave him some of the showbread, the ritualistic bread that was laid out on the table in the tabernacle that they changed out once a week. The priest could eat it after a week, I think, and they'd put fresh bread representing the tribes of Israel. It's important to remember that little story because the Lord Jesus refers to it over in the Gospels when the disciples and he are going through the grain, and they're accused by the enemy, like, hey, it's a Sabbath day, and you're going through the standing grain, and Jesus said, haven't you read what David did when he went to the tabernacle and ate the showbread? He's using that as an example. And the example is that people are more important than the ritual. The ritual is for the sake of the people, and when you go to sacrificing people for the sake of the ritual, you've got things backwards here. So chapter 22, David's on the lam for his life here. He has to actually leave the country. And David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave Adullam. He's going to be living in and out of this cave a lot over the next part of his life here with his soldiers that follow him. We're going to start picking them up here in tonight's chapter. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. They went to go see him and his whole family and everyone that was in. He started gathering up a crowd. Now, watch this. Everyone that was in distress and everyone that was in debt and everyone that was discontented, they gathered themselves unto him. And he became a leader, a captain over them. And there were with him about 400 men. So it's kind of like people that were tired of King Saul with good reason. And everybody who was in distress or dead or discontented said, I'm going to go and follow David. I want him to be the leader. And as I read that this time of our history in our own country, I think there's a lot of people in our own country that's in distress and indebted and discontented today, and they're looking for a new leader. And I'm old enough to watch that, though, and I know that in 4 more years, everybody will be discontented and in debt, and they're looking for a new leader. It's like they're always looking for a leader. And that's why I've just got to the point that, hey, this is just a bunch of baloney down here. Government's a necessary evil, but my kingdom's higher than that. My leader's the Lord Jesus Christ, and I'm going to put my hope in him. So David went thence to Mizpah of Moab, verse 3, and he said to the king of Moab, Let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you till I know what God will do for me. Till God straightens this out, David went to the king of Moab and said, I'm going to bring my mom and daddy and family. I want them to live with you, king. Now, remember, this is not Israel. He's gone to a nearby neighboring nation, but it is family. Was it David's grandmother? Or maybe his great-grandmother, Ruth, the Moabitish woman. So he's got family ties there, and he goes out of Israel to hide his family where he'll be safe there till he figures out how God's going to handle this situation. Verse 4, and he brought them, his mom and daddy, before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him, with the king, all the while that David was in the hold or living in the cave in the woods. Because David knew old King Saul was evil enough that he'd go and kill his family because he didn't want David. And the prophet Gad, this is important, the prophet Gad, who we find out over in Chronicles, evidently traveled around with David, and David said that was his seer, his personal prophet, because David was tied to a prophet because he realized, hey, there's something going on spiritually that's more than the government that you see down here. And prophet Gad said to David, abide not in the hold. Don't stay there right now. Depart and get thee into the land of Judah. And so David listened to what the prophet said. The prophet said, I've heard from God, David, we need to go into the land of Judah. Then David departed, and he came to the forest of Herath. Now when Saul, meanwhile back at the palace, when Saul heard that David was discovered and the men that were with him, now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having a spear in his hand, You don't want to be around Saul when he's got a spear in his hand. He's just got a habit of throwing it at people, right? The spears and javelins. And all his servants were standing about him. They're having a little cabinet meeting. The king's over here and the leadership's there, and Saul's standing there with his spear in his hand, and he gets that anger again. Saul said to his servants that stood about him, "Hear now, you Benjamites, will the son of Jesse," that's David, remember, "will he give every one of you fields and vineyards and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? Will he do this for you?" You know, King Saul's still the consummate politician. You know, he can't do nothing for you that I don't do for you. So I'll put a chicken in every pot. I'm going to give you like politicians do. If you want me to be your leader, well, I'll give you this and I'll give you that but you got to help me be the leader now. I'll give every one of you fields and vineyards, and I'll make you captains of thousands and captains of hundreds. Life's going to be good if you just keep me as your king. But David can't do that for you. But in spite of how good I've been to you, Saul's saying, verse 8, that all of you have conspired against me. And there's none that shows me that my sons made a league with the son of Jesse. And there's none of you that's sorry for it. Nobody's sorry for old King Saul, he says. You don't even feel sorry for me. Or show unto me that my son stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait at this day. Then answered Doeg the Edomite. Remember when David went down to the tabernacle to get the showbread, he looked over there and there's old King Saul's foreman, Doeg, who was an Edomite from the country of Edom, and Saul had made him over all kinds of stuff here, over the ranch, and now he's over the people too. And he saw David over there, and David knew there's going to be problems. So Doeg's back up here, Saul now. And Saul's giving this little speech that y'all have betrayed me. Nobody's told me what all's going on with this David boy, the son of Jesse. So verse 9 answered Doeg the Edomite, which was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of when I was down in Nob, I saw that boy down there, king. And the Ahimelech, the son, the priest, Ahimelech, he prayed for him. He inquired of the Lord for him, and he gave him victuals, food, became victuals in Appalachia, but it's where it came from, King James Bible, victuals, victuals, food. He fed him, the showbread, and he gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine. Now remember where the sword came from to start with. David's the one that got it when he killed Goliath and cut his head off and took his sword. Now the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest. So this was news to King Saul. Old Doeg's done told everything now, and the king sends somebody, you go get that priest down there at that tabernacle, and you bring him back. You bring him from Nob right up here. I want to see the king. And the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house. Bring his whole family up here. And bring all the priests that are down there at Nob. I want to talk to all of them, the king said. And they came, all of them, to the king. Verse 12, and Saul said, Hear now listen, you son of Ahitub. And he answered and said, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, Why have you conspired against me? You're a traitor, that you and the son of Jesse, David, and that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and you've prayed for him, you've inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait as it this day. Then Ahimelech answered. He's been called on the carpet. It's his day in court. Verse 14, Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who is so faithful among all the servants of the king? Who's so faithful among all the servants as David is? Which is the king's son-in-law. Don't forget, he's your son-in-law. Remember, he married Saul's daughter. And he goes at your bidding, and he's honorable in your house. He hadn't done anything wrong, he's trying to tell Saul. And the priest goes on and says, Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? I think he said, This is not the first time I've prayed for him. Everybody knows David, and he's your son-in-law. You think that's the first time I prayed for him? Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father, my family, for all thy servant, I knew nothing of this, less or more. All I knew is the king's son-in-law was here, and he's hungry, and I fed him. He asked for a sword, and I gave him a sword. I prayed for him. That's just being a good priest. And the king, Saul, he said, you're going to die, Ahimelech. I'm going to kill you. You and your family too. All your father's house. I'm going to kill you and your family because you helped that boy out. And the king said to the footmen, all these people that are standing around now, his servants that stood about him, turn and slay the priest. Kill him. Kill the priest of the Lord. Because their hand also is with David. And because they knew when he fled, and they did not show it to, they didn't tell on him. But the servants of the king, they would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priest of the Lord. Now, in most every crowd, even when it don't look like they're Christians in the crowd, there's usually somebody or some folks that still, thank goodness, have the fear of God in them. That we ain't going to kill God's men because of that. You know, we ain't going to. And they knew that the king was liable to kill them if they wouldn't carry out his orders. But they're like, whoa, we've got to obey God and not the king on this one right here. We can't go and kill God's people over that. So they wouldn't do it. See, there's Israelites. They feared God. But old Doeg standing there, remember, he's an Edomite. He probably don't even believe and serve the God of Israel. So the king said to Doeg, you do it. Turn thou and fall upon the priest. And Doeg, the Edomite, turned. He was probably thinking he'd get another promotion. The king would give him something else, right? And he fell upon the priest. It means he pulled out his sword and he started killing them. And he slew them on that day, 85 persons that did wear the linen ephod. People that wore the linen ephod, that was their priestly garments. He killed 85 priests that day. And that ain't all. Then he went down to Nob, the city of the priest. And he smote or killed with the edge of the sword both men and women, children and sucklings, that's babies. And he killed their oxes and their asses and their sheep with the edge of the sword. And one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, Ahimelech's boy named Abiathar, he escaped. And he fled to David. And Abiathar showed David that Saul had slain the Lord's priest. And David said to Abiathar, I knew it that day. I knew it when I saw Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul. And David said, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. I'm responsible for this. And then David tells Abiathar, you stay with me, abide with me, fear not, for he that seeks thy life, he that seeks my life, seeks thy life, but with me you'll be safe. Stay here with me. And that's kind of like the cliffhanger at the end of this chapter, see what's going to happen next. But there's a lot of bad things going here, but sometimes we go through a lot of bad things in history and in our own personal history, but you know what, hang on to the Lord, because I know the end from the beginning. God and God's people are going to be the ultimate victors. See you next time.